Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
How you doing?
Okay, I have a quiz for you.
All
Who's this
righty.
person?
Who is that person? That is that's a white male. Definitely a white male.
Getting clearer for you?
Still a white male.
You... How about if I reveal the
He's
caption?
He's a shrinking white
him?
male. He's getting smaller. There's something wrong, Mickey. He looks a little familiar, actually.
Yeah.
Who is he?
He's disappeared. He's Timothy Geithner, Bob, the man.
Oh, he was Secretary of the Treasury once, was he not?
Right.
Correct. I knew, yeah.
And why is he relevant? Because he has lowered... Oh, go ahead. You can say why he's relevant.
I have no idea, man.
He's lowered our national standards for paying your taxes. He's Secretary of the fucking Treasury, and in his nomination hearings, it was revealed that he didn't pay $34,000 of taxes. And what's worse, the taxes were for 4 years. He didn't pay his payroll tax for 4 years, and 2 years were too old for the statute of limitations. So when he paid the IRS, he didn't pay him those 2 years. He kept those. He pocketed those 2 years and only paid the ones where they could actually prosecute him. And how ridiculous was that? Yet he eventually paid them back when the Obama people made him pay him back. And he was confirmed, and he was Secretary of Treasury for 4 years. He was running the IRS, and he didn't pay his fucking taxes.
Okay, so I was going to ask, I'll wait for you to put your earpiece back in your ear so you can hear what I'm saying. I was going to ask, why are we revisiting this particular part of history? I guess he was in the Obama administration or something, but I fear that you're going to say, now, Bob, the next question is, what news story from this week is that relevant to? Otherwise, I'm forced to ask you, why?
Well, maybe it was a news story that dropped Friday last week, but the Hunter Biden misdemeanor plea for his back taxes, his not paying taxes, was more in taxes, but it doesn't bother me. We misdemeanor for not paying taxes. I think the mayor of Chicago, Harold Washington, didn't even file taxes for many years. It's just taxes aren't such a big deal. Documents aren't such a big deal. Trump is a documents case. Misdemeanors all around. That's my solution to all our nation's problems.
Just everyone.
Hunter pleads to a misdemeanor. Trump pleads to a misdemeanor. Put that behind it. Let Trump stop capitalizing on his prosecution. Let DeSantis beat him. Everything's fine with the world.
So everyone indicted for anything gets an amnesty?
No, it has to plead to a misdemeanor.
Has to involve either documents or taxes. Yeah, I get it. That's a coherent worldview.
I just think our two major prosecutions that are now that were most recent prosecutions are not as big a deal as people on either side make them out. And I'm perfectly fine if they plead guilty to a crime. They're criminals, but they plead guilty to a misdemeanor. That seems like a perfectly good compromise. The charges against Hunter now that are coming out are much more serious. Did you see the phone call that he made?
No.
Oh, he was a WhatsApp message to the China guy who was going to funnel him millions of dollars.
What did he say?
It was unbelievable. He said basically, it was incredibly thuggish. I'm sitting here with the president now, and we are waiting for your phone call.
Wait, this was when? Who was the president?
With the vice president, with the former vice president, with his father when he was formerly vice president.
I'm sitting here with the former vice president. That's definitely different from sitting there with the president. I'm glad we got that cleared up.
I got carried away. We're waiting for your phone call. Do not have one of your underlings call, because then it will show you that I'm a guy who bears grudges forever. It was unbelievable.
But what's incriminating? I mean, it's not even. There are not even any strictures on Biden himself at this point. He's no longer in government. So what's the deal?
The deal is Joe said he didn't know anything about his son's business. And if he's sitting there in the room with him, maybe he did know something about his son's business. Second, he's obviously trading on his father's possible future influence to get the money from this guy's
or current
firm.
Influence. I mean, he still knows people. Right. Okay, but it's not illegal or anything.
I thought you said it's totally corrupt.
I thought you said this was worse than a misdemeanor, which I would take to mean a felony, but this isn't even a misdemeanor.
seems like
So in Mickey's world,
if it's
actual
influence
crimes are
peddling,
forgiven, but non-crimes are crimes.
it's
I'm
it.
game. I
Well,
can go either way. I just want the rules to be clear, and I will
well,
conduct my life accordingly.
that fits with what the public opprobrium should be, and it fits with the law of impeachment too, which is it doesn't have to be a crime; it could be something really bad, and this is something really bad. He's trading on the influence of his father,
Yeah, but
and
Mickey,
that
he's
if
not
he
running for
had that
office.
practice, right? But if he
Hunter's
had
not
that
running
practice
for
when if he
office.
had that practice when Biden was uh was out of office, and he continued to break in money when Biden's in office. There's arguments that Biden knew about it when he was in office, and if the rumors of 10% for the big guy are true, Biden himself was profiting from it. It's all sleazy. Hey,
Okay,
Mike
I've
Kinsley may
lost
be
track
writing an
of all
article
the
for Harper's.
connections.
Mike Kinsley may be writing an article for Harper saying the crime is not what's illegal, it's what's legal, and the public should shame the people who do the legal bad thing. And I may actually have the date wrong. It may have been when he was sitting vice president.
Well, that's very important. I mean, look, and I don't doubt that there was sleazy shit going on when he was vice president. I mean, it's at least not highly improbable given everything I know. But
When he was
what
vice
you're talking
president, I mean,
about
when he
now
wasn't.
seems to amount to almost nothing.
What? Well, I don't understand. Why is why
Well,
do you
wasn't
not
it?
doubt that there's sleazy shit when he was vice president?
Well,
That seems
what
like a big admission.
the stuff, the money that went into these like LLC controlled by Hunter. Then at roughly the same time, money was distributed to various Biden relatives. Was Biden vice president when that happened? That is a much bigger deal than this, even though strictly speaking, it's not a documented crime. It's still a lot sleazier.
Um,
Mickey, whatever
I
you're
think this
looking
is.
for,
I think this
it's
is
getting
the.
your face very close to the camera.
Okay,
Okay,
I think I
possibly
understand that.
closer than you want it to be.
I understand that. It's a beautiful face, the way Hunter is a beautiful boy, and I'm just looking for what the date of this thing is. Um, the I think it's the exact same transaction, Bob.
So it's when he's no
Uh,
longer vice president you're talking about, or
that's what I'm
anyway,
trying to
we
find
don't
out.
know. We don't know. Look, what else happened? If you are we done with? I mean, Hunter. I don't look. You know my position on the Trump indictment. I don't think it's wise or good. It's banana republicly. If it is politically motivated, it's stupid politics because it only makes Trump more beloved within his base. And if the idea is Trump is the guy we want to run against, be careful what you wish for. I'll tell you what. Let's switch to this. Okay, more evidence.
Um,
Here's the news quiz for you. What new evidence was there this week that Biden is not fit for office and should not run again?
but the year was 2017, so when he was out of office, uh, I want to do a quick reading of the phone call if that's possible.
Okay.
Tell the director that I would like to resolve this now before it gets out of hand, and now means tonight. And Z, if I get a call or text from anyone involved in this other than you, Zhang, or the chairman, I will make certain that between the man sitting next to me and every person he knows and my ability to forever hold a grudge, that you will regret not following my direction. So it's also a shakedown. Okay, it's perfectly normal, Bob. Perfectly normal shakedown for the ex-vice president, future
Uh,
candidate.
I wonder. So,
Um,
do we know that Biden was really next to him? Because that's just such a.
we don't. We could have
Oh,
been making it up, but they have now traced. They've now put him in the Rehoboth House on that day. Put both of them in the Rehoboth House on that day. They weren't necessarily in the same
no,
room.
the only reason I'm wondering is because that's such a weird, thuggish way to talk. I'd almost be surprised, but if Biden, if he would talk that way with Biden listening in, and maybe Biden was down the hall and he was going to call him when the guy showed up on the phone, that's probably
Yeah,
more
or
likely.
he was trying to impress his dad, which how thuggish he could be.
Maybe.
It was very similar to the talk that Biden gave in Ukraine about how he got rid of the prosecutor. And then I told them I'm leaving for the airport now. If you don't sack this guy, and sure enough, they sacked the guy. So it's
Okay, but
it's the
this is
Biden MO.
and this is your clue. That is a clue. Biden talking like a hard ass kind of is a clue to the second part of
It's,
the news quiz. What did he do this week that is more evidence that he's not fit to be president?
well, here's the thing. I think you're talking about his gaffe about China.
Yeah.
I think his gaffes tend to make him look better because he seems to convey insider knowledge and nuance in the gaffes, even when it's a gaffe. In other words, this time he said, in the attempt to exonerate Z, and I assume calm relations, he said, "Well, Z didn't really know about this balloon," and either that's valuable inside information. It's nice to know that Biden knows the difference between the president of China knowing and not knowing, or else it is purposeful disinformation designed to exonerate Z. Either way, it works to
let's
his
tell
favor.
people.
Then he took it all away.
Mickey, Mickey,
took it all away by calling him a dictator.
Okay, good. Let's tell people what happened, just in case they didn't read everything you read this.
I was getting there. I was getting there. You keep interrupting.
Yeah, that was what slowed you down. So he was at one defense of him. So first of all, no, let's set the total stage, okay? So Anthony Blinken, 2 years ago, his inaugural visit to China, gets up at the beginning and harangues them about their human rights record and everything. Predictably, is going to sabotage the whole thing. And indeed, the meeting, it just dissolves in acrimony, basically. China responds by listing the various things wrong with American society. It's just typical blobster being stupid. And so then now Blinken finally, after the balloon shoot down and everything, is going to China again. And I even wrote a week before in the Nonzero newsletter, let's see if he's learned his lesson and he'll shut the hell up about China's human rights record. You can talk about it if you want, but there's no point going over there expecting anything constructive to happen if that's what you're going to do. So he's a good boy. And in fact, at the end, he says, we reiterate one China policy. We don't favor Taiwan independence, which has been our policy forever, even though some people got upset about him saying that. And then, okay, things are looking a little better. And then immediately the headline is Biden calls Xi a dictator and some China spokesman goes berserk. Now, the defense of Biden that some people are launching is that, well, it was a fundraiser. He thought it was maybe off the record. No. Ever since, and Biden is well aware, or at least once was, of Obama's famous screw up where he thought, and this is like 2008, I think, he thought he was, it was just a fundraiser. It was just donors. And he said that thing about how people in red states bitterly cling to their guns and religion. Very memorable screw up. Established once and for all in the digital age, there is no such thing as a private meeting involving more than three people. And
reestablished when Mitt Romney said his thing about the 49% or the 42% who pay taxes, and it was overheard at a fundraiser, and that killed his campaign. That was the David Corn story. Yeah,
right. But that was 4 years later, right?
I said reinforced 4 years later.
Yeah. Okay. And so there's no excuse that Biden just thought, who knows? Just because I'm in a room full of people with smartphones, why would this ever get out? And it's just, I'm sorry, this is serious. And of course, you say that, and these people go, "Oh, you're kowtowing to China," and so on. Look, we call it diplomacy, and the U.S. used to be good at it, and it's but anyway, Biden, I don't think the Biden of 20 years ago does this, but well, he was always a loose cannon, but I just think it's worse. It's more evidence. Get him off stage. If the Democrats care about their country, their party, the world, anything, they'll find a way to push him off stage.
People misspeak all the time. Biden's red line comment about Syria was much more serious, and he wasn't ushered off stage.
Wait, which comment was that?
Where he said that if the head of Syria,
Assad,
whatever his name is, Assad, was it if he uses chemical weapons that would be a red line or something?
You mean Obama?
Obama, yes,
right. And he said Biden.
Obama and the red line was crossed and Obama decided not to do anything, he should never have said it in the first place, as people pointed out at the time.
Yeah, but I think that was at least intentional. I mean, that was just classic blob idiocy. That was just stupid policy. I don't think that was that an improvisation?
I think he sort of had it in his head and sort of went over the line, I believe.
I mean, the other thing he said is Assad must go. That was super stupid. They were both stupid. I mean, the one
That was
is an
very
invitation for a false flag attack, which, by the way, we're doing again with.
It was also an invitation for all these people to risk their lives and revolt against Assad, and they were all killed. It's a terrible thing to say.
Well,
he should have said. He should have said, if you're starting an armed revolution against Assad, don't count on our help. We're with you, but don't count on our help. We're not going to save you.
I mean, the red line line was an invitation for a false flag, and there's, I think, another one of those brewing in Ukraine around the nuclear plant. I think Lindsey Graham and somebody else are writing some letter saying that. I mean, Zelensky started talking about how Russia is going to sabotage the nuclear plant, and they wrote some letter that I think would amount to, if taken seriously, encouragement for false flag attack, that would be, an attack that would be blamed on Russia and an invitation for us to intervene or something. The speaking of which, yeah.
Can we give a verdict on Biden? It was a mistake. Okay, it was bad. Another reason why the Democrats might want to usher him off the stage, and don't you see how that fits with what we were talking about at the beginning, which is that they are going to use the Hunter Biden 10% for the big guy scandal to usher Biden off the stage.
No, I said that before. I said that the general aura of sleaze, that whatever the underlying truth looks like an aura of sleaze, is another reason for him not to be the candidate.
But it's also the means by which they're going to make him not the candidate.
Oh,
in other words, all of a sudden, some of the Democratic U.S. attorneys and some of the Democrats in Congress are going to somehow let leak all sorts of damning evidence on Biden, and the press is somehow all of a sudden going to be interested in it, and all of a sudden Biden's going to be in trouble and announce he's not seeking a second term.
And you think this is part of that? This particular evidence that just came out? How did the transcript come out?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's from a
we buried your lead.
whistleblower who is appearing, who gave testimony to the House, I believe, and the Republicans are promoting it, but the New York Times is finally covering it. That quote I read you was from the New York Times.
That's a sign. If the mainstream liberal media starts paying close,
and you don't see
you
don't see Democrats going around, this whistleblower is a liar. He can't be trusted. They're not saying that.
I want to say something about Ukraine, but first let's talk a little about RFK, because that's relevant to this. I think we may have reached peak RFK, but tell me what you think about this. I mean, first of all, okay, so this big brouhaha this week. Two kind of Twitter Musk-related brouhahas. There's the Zuckerberg-Musk cage match, which we can talk about in the Parrot room. But there's also the Peter Hotez, the Joe Rogan invitation for Peter Hotez to debate RFK about vaccines. Hotez doesn't want to. He's a virologist and a doctor. And I can't tell how much attention this got, like whether on cable news and so on. But I do have a theory that once RFK really becomes prominent, the first thing that happens is the 20% of the people who said they support him, when they hear him talk, some of them may be put off by his voice. He has this dystopia, a muscular disease that impairs his voice. And I think that may happen. But also, I think now the official mainstream, like resistance type media, is much more devoted to discrediting him on the vaccine stuff as a result of this latest round of.
Well, it was worse than that. It was as if a memo went out suddenly. First, there was a story in the New York Times saying the White House is troubled by or annoyed by RFK Jr.'s campaign. It's a problem for them. And then, as if that was the starting gun, all of a sudden, virtually every news outlet in America started trashing RFK Jr. And this Joe Rogan thing was part of that, but there was much
Mhm.
more than that. They were everybody right and left was trashing him. It was about time he got trashed. He was getting too much good publicity, but it was eerily, uh, coincidental. All the
But it's hard to say because wasn't the Rogan thing a lot of the impetus for it? Rogan's certainly not in the tank. He's not trying to undermine
no,
RFK.
I think the Rogan thing just came along conveniently.
Well, anyway, I was hoping he would at least get taken seriously enough so that somebody else could rush on stage and say, I can save us from RFK. I'll run against Biden.
Well, I think that'll happen.
Well, not if RFK fades. They'll have to come up with another reason.
Oh, he's not going to fade totally. All that counts is how much he gets in New Hampshire, and if he gets around, and now his expectations are probably above 15%. If he sticks below that, then yes, he'll be considered to have
Well, if
faded.
nobody jumps in until New Hampshire, we're in trouble, man. I want to see action. Oh, I know who. Mark Milley. Mark Milley should retire and run.
Lyndon Johnson retired after New Hampshire. You're serious about Milley?
Look, he'd win. He'd win
I'm not so sure.
against Trump. He'd win in the general. Look, my whole thesis is almost anyone can beat Trump.
Sure.
You can beat Trump. I can beat Trump. There's one man who can't beat Trump, Joe Biden.
I don't think that's quite right. Since many polls show Trump ahead at the moment, but
that's my point. They show him ahead of Biden, right?
Right.
That's what I'm saying. Biden can't.
They show Trump being pretty. They show Trump being pretty strong. In other words,
my actual position is Biden stands a good chance of losing to Trump, like at least a 40% chance, and very few other mainstream Democrats would stand as high a chance. You don't need much to beat Trump, but you can't be an 80-whatever-year-old with incipient dementia. That's a problem.
I think a lot of people would lose to Trump. That's my point. But there are Democrats who would beat him. I'm not sure about Mark Milley. I mean, what are the progressive left that comes out to vote for the Democrat? Would they love Mark Milley?
He's woke. He's woke.
Right. That's my problem with him.
That's your problem. You're not a progressive Democrat, but
I'm a swing voter, Bob.
Yeah,
I'm a crucial swing voter.
Mm-hmm.
I should move to Waukesha County. I'm such a swing voter.
So anyway, what else is there talking? You want to talk about a little Ukraine?
There was one interesting thing that was said about Ukraine that I wanted to tell you, but you tell me.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
This counteroffensive is somewhat Kahutek-like. It is disappointing.
Mm-hmm.
And Bill Galston made an interesting point, which is he was saying what is my party line, which is maybe Ukraine will have to accept different borders and negotiate. And if the counteroffensive fails, that's the reality they're going to be facing. But he said, and they want to do it now in case Trump wins, they're going to get a much worse deal after Trump wins. So they want to cut the deal when Biden's president, so better start thinking about it now.
He's saying that's how they should be thinking. That's not how they are thinking.
Correct.
Oh, I mean, who knows? Again, Trump tends to surrender to the blob in the end. I'm not sure how different that would all be. But I do think, well, first of all, yeah, it's not going well. A lot of signs of that. People saying it, even Zelensky saying it's not progressing as fast as we had hoped. Maybe the clearest sign is that how can I possibly be blocking on his name? The former
Prigozhin.
What? No, the former ambassador.
McFaul. Your friend.
Yeah, my friend.
Your frenemy. Where would you
be
without him?
I even wrote about this. This is how out of it this has been like the worst week of my whole life. But my brain is completely dead. Who
am I speaking to, please?
Yeah, exactly. But McFaul is suddenly saying we need a peace envoy. He's now suddenly in favor of diplomacy. Now, if you read his piece about it, it's bullshit, basically. But still, the fact that he even thinks he needs to conceal his hawkishness and dovishness suggests that the wind may start blowing that way, and people are realizing this offensive may well go nowhere. The offensive hasn't failed, but Plan A has failed, and I don't know if they have a Plan
Well,
B.
they've only committed a quarter of their troops.
Yeah, but it's just been they're way behind where they'd hoped to be. They've taken very substantial losses of men and equipment, and they're almost certainly taking more casualties than Russia. That's just the way it works on offensives, unless they are blindingly successful. And if they keep it up for another couple of months, they're going to be screwed because, first of all, I mean, you remember I proposed a couple of months ago when I went back and listened to the video. It was I think the April 28th episode of our podcast. I said, cancel the offensive, move to defense, use all these freshly trained troops and equipment to have an impenetrable defense. Putin will have to negotiate. Well, Putin is much less in a mood to negotiate now than he was 3 weeks ago. Now that he's seen that the offensive, which for all he knew would succeed, is flailing. Okay, so secondly, if he does want to negotiate, he's got more leverage than he would have had three weeks ago, and he's going to have a lot more leverage if they continue this thing for 2 months and it keeps going the way it is. Because at that point, he's going to be thinking, I might be able to make some real territorial gains here. I've talked about that. So it's not too late for them to switch to a defensive posture, but they won't be smart enough.
And he may want to wait for Trump himself. I mean, you think Trump is going to prosecute the war as vigorously as Biden does through proxy? I don't think so.
I don't think there's good look unless this offensive does a big turnaround, and it could, but it's really not going well. And unless it goes well, Biden's not going to want to prosecute this war for much longer. He's going to be wanting to wind it down. It's just a question of the wind down rate. And I mean,
How about this scenario? Trump wins, and Zelensky miraculously comes up with the goods on Joe Biden and Hunter, and all of a sudden Trump's on Ukraine's side, and the war goes on for another 4 years.
Grand unified theory. That's great.
Well, the two incidents aren't that far apart,
They're not unrelated. Now, one, can I talk about the dam a little bit? By the way, this guy, there are other people proposing this, that it's Daniel Davis, this colonel who only appears on Fox News because MSNBC and, doesn't want to hear anything rational about the Ukraine war. He says, prudent course of action for Kyiv would be to suspend its offensive, convert to positional battles along the line of contact to ensure Russia can't attack in force anywhere, and began building their own line of elaborate defensive fortifications. There is likely still time to build a strong defense, and Ukraine still has strength enough to man a powerful defense of their own. Unlike me, he's actually an experienced person who knows what he's talking about.
Isn't there some military trick that I didn't expect like a Pickett's charge right into the Russian lines. I expected, why can't they land paratroopers behind the Russian lines and attack them surprise from the rear or something? Why can't they do a pincer movement or a something movement? Or I know nothing about the military, but this seems very plotting for their brilliant
generals. I thought there was going to be either some super clever strategy or some secret weapon. But the thing is, the opening stages haven't gone well enough to even know what the strategy really was. I mean, there are these several lines of attack. The goal was probably for one of them to be so successful that Russia had to divert forces there. And then we were going to see where the real attack was going to be. But they didn't, Ukraine didn't succeed in causing trouble along any of these. I mean, of course, a lot of people died on both sides. I mean, but they didn't make a significant enough breakthrough to divert, to kind of warp Russia's overall force structure.
They claim to be making gains around Bakhmut, your favorite town.
Yeah, well, meanwhile, north of Bakhmut, the Russians are making gains. I honestly think if you do the math over the last week, I think Russia has gained more territory than Ukraine has during the Ukraine offensive. And this is what I was warning about. If you focus all of these troops on an offensive, your defensive lines have got to weaken somewhere. So can I talk about the dam a little?
Yeah.
So I have increased my estimate of the chances that Russia blew up the dam have gone from 0% to like 5 or 10%. My estimate of the chances that Ukraine did it have gone from like 10% to like 60%. I still think there's some possibility that it was just a collapse. But there was this New York Times story saying that 2 separate seismographic stations had detected 2 significant explosions from at least within a 20-mile, 15-mile zone that the dam is part of. They acted as if that made it very likely that it was an explosion. Of course, the Times didn't even entertain the possibility that it was Ukraine doing it, even though we know that they have scuba divers who blow shit up. And I've also heard, but again, this is not the kind of thing the Times would explore. I heard somewhere, I don't know if it's true, that, Ukraine controlled one side of the dam, one end of the dam. I've heard that there were, that the tunnels in the dam go all the way across. The interior of the dam is accessible from that end too. So it's conceivable that even if it did blow up, that Ukraine did it. The evidence that Ukraine, whether you want to say that Ukraine benefited from the collapse or that Russia suffered from it, however you look at it, that has only grown. It was completely predictable. I want to play you something that will kind of convey what the new line is on how the new line is on how we frame Russia's complicity in this. So this is a guy named Jack Watling, I think former general or something, totally mainstream, respected mainstream analyst. He's on some podcast, and this is what he says about the dam.
If one more thing I should add, there are wild cards. The enemy always gets a vote. They blew up the one dam on the Dnipro a few days ago, and it was disastrous for the Russians. I don't think they realized how bad that was going to be.
See, so the new line is that Russia meant to blow up the dam just a little. Not clear what good that would have done, but they made a mistake and blew it up a lot. In fact, there's a recording of, Russian voices. This was provided by, and the general pattern here is all evidence, the evidence that it was an explosion, the New York Times got from places other than the Ukrainian government. All evidence that Russia did the explosion comes from the Ukraine government. Right. And one of them is this quote where it's 2 Russian voices, and they say, quote, "Our sabotage groups were there. They wanted to create a scare with the dam. It didn't go quite go according to plan." And I mean, they have to say something like this. They have to say something like this because it was obvious from the beginning, although you won't read this in much Western media, that this was on balance, if anything, bad for Russia. It's become only more apparent since then. The whole reservoir has dried up. What now runs through the reservoir is just the Dnipro River. So now, in principle, anywhere Ukraine can throw down a couple of quick bridges and do a river crossing. Russia doesn't have entrenchments to defend against that, and now they have to worry about that.
Why shouldn't Ukraine launch a quick strike right now before they can rebuild their defenses?
Well, they're kind of otherwise occupied. I mean, they don't have a lot of spare troops, but
they have 3/4 of their troops left, according to the article I read.
So anyway, the official story that no one questions is that Russia used 2 huge explosive devices because they wanted to just kind of blow up the dam, but not really blow it up. And then it really blew up, and they were shocked. It's just crazy. It's just crazy. And
I don't understand how it's just the interior of the dam is sort of a DMZ. It's like
no.
It's like they have soccer matches there and are friends with the Russians underneath the dam, or what's going on underneath the dam?
That's right. They sing Christmas carols on Christmas Eve, like in those trenches in World War I. No, it's Russia definitely controls the interior part of the dam building. On the Russian side, there's this big building with all the controls. And people are saying they probably put the bomb like somewhere in there under in the interior of the dam. I heard somewhere, but I don't know, because I'm, English speaking media is unlikely to tell you definitively. I mean, the Times, would never look into something like this, but that even from the Ukraine side of the dam, there is a tunnel. You can access the interior of the dam, and I presume if that's the case, they long ago just implicitly agreed on a deal where, okay, here's a closed door. We don't go past it. You don't go past it. If it's the case that it's accessible from the Ukraine side, I'm not sure it is. Now, it is the case apparently that the guy on YouTube who argues for structural collapse points out that Russia had only been opening the sluice gate on its side for months, and he thinks that asymmetry, I think, could have contributed to the trouble. And the reason is apparently, to open the gate, you have to get a guy over there in like a crane or something. It's very complicated. And he thinks they were afraid that person would be shot by Ukrainians. And so they don't venture over on that side. But that demonstrates that the Ukrainians are kind of in control of that side of the dam. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure I seem to be making a bigger deal out of this than it's worth. It's just the accumulated frustration. It's like you and the way the media was covering Trump.
What?
It just gets frustrating.
Right. What about the argument that one of our readers made, which is that Cy Hirsch's story is not discredited? We may this is not with the dam, but with the other story that's super frustrating, which is the coverage of the blowing up of the pipeline.
It's relevant to the dam.
That Ukraine did it, but they were really helped by Americans. So the secret unit that Seymour Hersh talked about may have actually, maybe 3 of the Ukrainians were really Americans from the secret unit. This is on the assumption that the Ukrainians aren't as good as the Americans, which is a false assumption, obviously. But
well, there are in the Discord documents, this intelligence report that the U.S. gets from a European nation that Ukraine is planning this thing. I suppose it's conceivable that the European nation didn't know that the U.S. was in cahoots with the Ukrainians. Okay, but still, superficially, that seems a little at odds with the scenario you just outlined. And the other thing, we mentioned this last week, is the U.S. Maybe leaked or something that they warned Ukraine against it. But that could be bullshit, I guess, because I think that's just some kind of leak. I don't think that's in the Discord document.
Well, even if we were going to do it, we would probably warn Ukraine against it just for the record, so it would look good. Right?
Yeah, I guess. I'm on that one. I'm going with the most parsimonious theory, which is that Ukraine did it and we didn't, but who knows?
The other Ukraine news was that they seem to have abandoned this idea of a fast track for Ukraine into NATO. Although your theory, which seemed crazy to me 6 months ago, that as part of the deal, Ukraine's going to have to be part of NATO, seems to be widely accepted. It's just not on a fast track.
Well, they've been technically NATO has been saying they expect Ukraine to eventually become a member ever since 2008.
Right, but we were against that because it was provocative to Putin until you turned and said it was a good idea. On a dime, unexpectedly.
I did. I was just saying that, look, if there's going to be an end to the war, Ukraine is going to, to get Ukraine to unless their back is just completely against the wall, to get Ukraine to agree to a de facto end of the war, there's going to have to be some kind of security arrangement they consider ironclad. One scenario is NATO membership. Now, it may turn out that Putin needs a fig leaf and can't be seen as accepting that, even though there's going to have to be a security structure that's in some ways tantamount to NATO membership. I don't know. But yeah, I think Zelensky, up until this latest NATO meeting, has that happened yet, or is it happening now or something? Anyway,
it's about to happen.
Was gunning for something significant, and I think it's been pretty clear. It's become pretty clear he's not getting much, at least not anything like actual NATO membership offer.
Right. So I think we have time for one more big topic, or maybe 2.
Go ahead.
We have the rapidly metastasizing Republican field. We have
Now, metastasizing is kind of an unkind word, Mickey.
right. That was a loaded word. Sorry. We have two official candidates. Will Hurd, who is a Republican former congressman from a border area in Texas, who is apparently the darling of the bulwark. And I think Mayor Suarez of Miami, who nobody could figure out why he's running except he hates Ron DeSantis. Two mentioned people.
Yeah, there's a theory. I think that's his role, is to undermine DeSantis. His role is to say, I know Florida. DeSantis is full of shit. He did a bad job. Bill Scher and Matt Lewis were talking about this on the DMZ podcast. I forget the details.
Yeah. Kristi Noem of South Dakota is making noises. She has all sorts of unnecessary ads featuring her attracting jobs and workers to South Dakota. And Governor Scott of, Senator Scott from Florida, fresh off his tremendous showing, failing to regain the Senate for the Republicans, is thinking about running for president. Because they all want to be president. And I was accused on Twitter of on this show just advancing unresearched hot takes.
Mm-hmm.
So here's my unresearched hot take on this. It's good for the DeSantis because if he beats all these other contenders for number 2, he will look stronger. In other words, he now doesn't have to beat Trump before New Hampshire. He doesn't have to beat Trump even in New Hampshire. He just has to do really well. But if he beats all the other pretenders to the Trump challenger, he looks like a big man.
And then 4 years from now, he's the guy. Is that it?
No, then he can take on Trump. But he looks good if he beats all the other little guys who will be gunning for him. They're not going to be gunning for Trump. They want to be the challenger to Trump, so they're gunning for DeSantis.
But isn't the fundamental problem that Trump has about 51% of the vote locked up, so they're all screwed in any event?
It's dipping to 49 and 48 in some polls, and it's early, and national polls, as everybody says, are not all that useful. What matters is the Iowa and New Hampshire polls. He's still way ahead there, but like 20 points. 20 points is completely, recoverable in New Hampshire and Iowa. I hate that I'm defending the Iowa primary caucuses, that they shouldn't exist. But now they've become crucial for my guy, so I have to pretend that they're a valid Democratic tool.
I like the Norman Rockwell part of them, American citizens convening in a diner.
What about the part where they don't know the results and never find out? How about
also that? Where they designed some app that, you mean that? We're talking the same thing. Yeah, the app.
Well, no, I claim they still don't know the results of the Gephardt-Simon race in 1988, although Gephardt partisans tell me I'm full of shit. But
well, they didn't have smartphones in Norman Rockwell's era. You can't have everything. Do you want Norman Rockwell's America, or do you want to be able to count votes? Make up your mind.
We'll hate that. We'll get back to that smartphone point later. It becomes relevant. But anyway, that's DeSantis also there. Two little things. He came up with a student loan position that seems vaguely liberal. He said, I don't want anybody to have to be burdened with a loan to go to college. Okay, well, what are you going to do about it? Sounds like a federal subsidy on the way. So it was phrased very well and very appealingly to sort of be a moderate, appealing position. He also delivered this attack on Trump where he was asked if he would support him, and he obviously launched into this prepared attack, but was quite effective on how Trump said Cuomo was a better governor in COVID than he was, and he was full of it. He said, didn't say full of shit, he said full of it. And barely gave the barest acknowledgement that, well, if the people vote for Trump, you have to respect that. He didn't say support him, but he said you have to respect that. But he has this weird tick that I'm trying to decide what I think about. Before he talks, he sort of rolls his head around like a bobblehead and sort of gets his neck together. And I guess this is something that, like, you do as a baseball batter before you take a swing. You sort of get all your spine aligned or something. Or a golfer. I mean, does a golfer do that? And it's at first
Not
I thought
so
it was
much.
just really obnoxious. It's like it seems sort of smug, and okay, now I'm ready to tee off on this guy, and you all are fucking idiots. Here we go. Uh, but now it's become sort of endearing. I would be upset if he lost it.
I
But I think if
I pity people who are listening to this and not watching it on YouTube and didn't see your 20-second bobblehead illustration of the dynamic. That was good.
I may not have captured the smugness of it, but it's very quick. But it telegraphs something, and I don't know whether it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah.
But I've become to sort of like it. I mean, it's okay now. I'm going to let him have it.
I mean, isn't the conventional wisdom that DeSantis is just tanking and like you're the only person still talking about him?
No, he's holding steady. The conventional wisdom was that every time he starts to get traction, they indict Trump on another crime, and Trump soars again in the polls, and everybody's forced to say how much they love Trump and how unfair this prosecution is. So he's holding at 20%. He's started to get traction a couple times and failed because of this dynamic, but nobody else is really getting a lot of traction. And if you see the polls, it's still a 3-tier thing. It's Trump, DeSantis, the pack.
Hey, here's a question. 2 questions. One is, aren't there enough people who really don't want Trump to become president, including Republicans and including rich ones, that somebody will work hard to create a third-party candidate who takes away from Trump? Part 2 of the question is, who would Robert Kennedy hurt as a third-party candidate?
The conventional wisdom is he hurts Trump, hurts Biden. I think that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and
it's not obvious when you look at his actual.
The first question is a very interesting question, and why isn't there a candidate, a no labels candidate? Everybody assumes the no labels candidate is going to elect Trump because it's run by the wife of a mostly Democratic pollster, and the people that flock to it tend to be goo good government types who probably are not going to vote for Trump. So why don't they find some sort of John McCain figure to dilute Trump vote? And I think the answer is the night is young. You're not the only person. You can't be the only person in America to have thought of this idea, and somebody's going to do it. And there's going to be some bulwark, never Trump Republican, who will do this. Maybe, who's Evan Conehead, whoever the guy is who always runs in Utah against Evan McMullin. Evan McMullin. McMullin. He hasn't got nothing better to do. Why doesn't he get another bout of fame and run for president?
Is he a Bill Kristol?
Bill Kristol will endorse him, and
is he a Kristol creation?
I don't think so, but Kristol definitely backed him when he was a nobody.
Well, Kristol always creates people he actually would like to be president. So it would be a switch for him if he created a Trump destroyer.
Well, right. I'm sure he would like McMullin to be president.
Yeah, but McMullin.
I'm sure this person will be somebody Kristol would be happy to be president.
It's not like just any Republican would be a Trump destroyer, right? A lot of them would hurt Biden more.
Will Hurd would be a good candidate for the Trump destroyer, I think, because he seems pretty conservative on foreign policy.
Conservative meaning like Trump?
I should come up with one by next week. But the problem is we have to hold him in reserve, and he can't run if DeSantis is the nominee.
Yeah, so we'll only talk about him in the Parrot room until the time
you can do whatever
comes.
you want, but I have to be very careful. Anyway, that's a very good idea. Thank you.
So, one quickly in foreign policy news, couple of things. Well, one is there's been a big deal. Couple of stories in the Wall Street Journal about how Cuba is building various kinds of menacing things. I mean, China is in Cuba. There seems to be more of a partnership between China and Cuba. Turns out it actually goes back a few years. And the initial journal report on this was misleading. The eavesdropping station goes back a few years. But then there's also supposedly some kind of military collaborative training thing or something on Cuba. I wrote about this in the Nonzero newsletter today. And the main point is just like, this is what you get when you sanction the shit out of Cuba forever. And they need money. They're going to do stuff like this, and everyone, the Bidens of the world, will read it as more evidence that the autocracies of the world are in league, and we must launch a global struggle against them. But it's the global struggle that's creating them. I mean, it's the fact that we sanction autocracies and authoritarian governments that encourages them to be in league.
I have friends who are
with each
going
other.
to Cuba right now. How severely sanctioned could they be?
Well,
They're not political. They're just going to have a good time.
It's never been impossible to travel there. It got easier during the Obama administration, and I went there once. But most of the sanctions, I mean, Obama tried to do an easing. It was a very constructive thing he deserves credit for. Trump, of course, I don't know what part of his ideology this supposedly flows from even, but Trump, of course, reinforced the retightened the screws, and the part of his ideology it flows from is I want to get votes in Florida, of course. But so now they're pretty bad, and Biden has not loosened things up much, if at all. It's just and I don't know why exactly, because if he thinks he's ever going to win Florida, he's wrong.
Right. You think at some point he'll write it off. I wonder if there are pre-existing ethnic ties between China and Cuba. I once went to a Chinese-Cuban restaurant in San Francisco, and I think there is an actual Chinese expat population that lived in Cuba for a while, and probably still does.
Could be.
Anyway,
I don't know.
but Cuba is involved everywhere. Cuba has a huge African influence too. I mean,
Well,
half
they have
of
a
fucking
big
African music is influenced by Cuban music.
they have a big black population.
Well, right, but we have a big black population. Well, I guess we're influencing African music too.
I
But
think
still,
American culture has some influence on the world, as I understand it.
I think you don't think it has to do with these medics they send all over the world as goodwill Samaritans. I think it does.
Good.
Like Peace Corps types. Okay. The Chinese Cuban food was good, by the way.
Final quick foreign policy point. So in Israel, things are getting pretty bad. So Israel raided Jenin, I guess a refugee camp, to try to uproot militants or something. And the militants were pretty well armed. They had some IEDs. They actually kind of blew up an Israeli armored vehicle, at least enough to get Israel's attention. So for the first time in a long time, Israel brought in a helicopter that launched strikes on people on the ground, and they brought in a drone that did. And I just realized that the way things are going in Israel, far-right extremists controlling the government, they just put this far-right lunatic in charge of settlements. And, more and more of the kind of armed Palestinian resistance you would expect in a situation like this. You add that to like the modern digital age, and what this drone made me think of is like, it's just going to get kind of Black Mirror-ish, where these Palestinians, I mean, not tomorrow, but possibly in coming years, are being hunted down by these completely unmanned drones, and Israel has to risk less in the way of life and limb than ever to crack the whip in the West Bank. And they've never had to risk much, of course, because they've got the guns, they've got the soldiers, and they've got the armored vehicles. But it's getting so bad. It's getting so bad.
And the unmanned drones will be controlled not by the government, but by individual groups of settlers on the West Bank.
Oh, man. See, that's the thing. They can off-the-shelf technology.
It's like Uber, but for drones.
Look, you can, I mean, in Ukraine, some of the drones that are in use, probably on both sides, but I know Russia, for example, they buy, not armaments from China, apparently, but just these consumer drones that people use to take like aerial shots of their weddings and stuff. And so that's a reconnaissance drone, but they also then equip them with these things that launch, that drop hand grenades. And yeah, settlers can do stuff like that. So it's just horrible. And I think the U.S. government's as complicit as anyone. We've refused to ever steer anyone forcefully toward any kind of settlement. And we had leverage with Israel more than we have now, I think. Didn't use it.
Okay. How long have we been talking?
Long enough, I think. Not an hour, but close. I mean, as long as we've been talking lately. So we could start
we can
slow
start
walk to the Parrot Room.
our ramp up to the Parrot Room. Okay. We didn't talk about Alito's trip. Talk about that there, or we can get rid of it now.
Where'd you go?
The Alito was bashed by ProPublica for taking a flight from Paul Singer. I don't know if you call him an investment banker. He's a Wall Street tycoon who I believe makes sort of threatening plays against the debt of foreign governments or something and wins big.
Is he the neocon funder?
Yeah, he's also a big pro-immigration guy. He's not the guy you want your Supreme Court justice taking a trip from. That's for sure. And they went on a hunting trip, and there's this picture of them with a fishing trip with these huge, I don't know, trouts or bass or something. And Singer's holding one, and Alito's holding a little smaller one, and like the guide is holding another one. And so Alito wrote a pre-buttal because they sent him questions, and Alito said, this is where the story's going. He wrote a pre-buttal in the Wall Street Journal, which doesn't seem to have gone over very well. And the main thing I'm troubled about is that he should, all these right-wingers going around with tycoons, probably a bad thing. Probably liberals do it too. It's a bad thing when they do it too. The empty seat defense is hilarious. Alito said in his pre-buttal, well, the seat otherwise would have been vacant. So I wasn't really costing Singer or anything. I just jumped into an empty seat. And this was a rationale that Arianna Huffington used to use during about 10 years ago. There was this big kerfuffle of how can you be a big green mocker, a big climate change activist, and take private flights. And Ariana's defense was the plane was going there anyway. And that's actually a good defense if all you're cared about is it was a good defense for her, and it actually worked for her because if all you care about is the emissions, the extra emissions of carrying Arianna Huffington aren't very great. If you cared about graft, on the other hand, it's a very bad defense. And of course, Arianna distinguished herself from Lori David, who was an even bigger green activist who flew her own plane. Who flew her own plane to these events and was a huge climate felon, But so
the Alito thing just seems like such a terrible idea in the wake of all the Clarence Thomas stuff, right? I mean, that's just fucking stupid. I'm sorry. These people.
This happened. I think this happened before the Clarence Thomas stuff.
Oh, it did? Oh, it's only come to light lately? Is that it?
I think so. I'm not sure. I think so.
It's still like if you're on the Supreme Court, I mean, the thing about it is Paul Singer is such an activist. And, he clearly wants to spend his money to get political things done. And by the way, he launched the Steele dossier,
He launched the Steele dossier. And then gave up on it. He's the guy who supposedly caused Mitt Romney to choose Paul Ryan as his vice presidential candidate. Now there's a disqualifying, act right there. So you're right. He's absolutely the worst guy you want to take a flight from. I don't know. My father was a judge. He wouldn't even accept. The plaintiff's lawyers offered him to be the speaker at get some award. Judge of the year or something, and he declined it. And he said, "I don't take most valuable player awards." But I mean, there are a lot of judges who are much more punctilious about this stuff than our Supreme Court justices are.
Totally.
I guess they think they're underpaid, and I guess they are maybe underpaid by current standards. But they're paid enough to live on. They should be careful.
Oh, totally. I mean, my father was the same way. He actually had the power for a while. He was involved in the awarding of contracts to restaurants that would serve soldiers in various places. And I was with him at one, and the guy said, "Oh, you don't have to pay for that." They were going to give us a free meal, and he wouldn't take it.
Yeah. I think you're allowed to vote, though. Didn't your father not vote?
You're allowed to vote, but there used to be this tradition among some people in the military that the division between civilian control and the
Huh,
military was so sacred that military officers should not vote. And my father
huh,
didn't vote.
huh. I bet Mark Milley voted.
Millie for prez, man.
He's an Eisenhower-like figure, Bob.
He isn't. Well, I mean, he's probably actually, objectively speaking,
He's
as good a politician. Eisenhower just had the aura from having won World War II, so he didn't. I mean, Eisenhower
and,
wasn't a compelling presence.
and Milley has the aura from losing Afghanistan, so they're equivalent.
We can't pin that on him, can we? He was.
Sure, you can pin some of it on him. A, it was a bungled withdrawal. He was in charge of the withdrawal. B, the whole operation, we were conned by these guys who we thought were on our side. And as soon as they were just waiting for us to leave, and they were going to turn tail immediately, they were totally in league with the enemy. And what kind of military tells us doesn't know that?
Yeah.
Thinks you're going to hold out for 6 months when in fact you're going to hold out for 6 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm groping for Biden alternatives. Sometimes they reach too far.
Um,
So what are we going to talk about in the pair?
you're back to you're back to Ro Khanna.
Totally.
There was a very interesting conference that I actually got up and watched. There's this
I thought you were going to say you spoke at it, and I thought there must be
no.
some mistake. Yeah. Okay.
There's this interesting schismatic debate between the old line AEI people who believe in the market and the economy is actually capitalism actually doing a pretty good job for most people, and the Oren Cass funded by the left American Compass Institute, which says no, capitalism isn't working and needs major modifications, but they claim to still be on the right.
Mhm.
I'm torn. I have loyalties to both camps, and they had a big conference and they fought it out. They had like a cage match, Musk versus Zuckerberg cage match in Washington. I could talk about that. They actually had some interesting emanations. There's
And I want to talk about you're talking about what you're going to talk about in the pair room, right?
right, and the
I want to talk
basic
about the
question is, if the economy is going so well, why are people so unhappy? That's the basic question. Go ahead, sir.
I want to talk about the another aspect of the Musk Zuckerberg cage match, which I think it's safe to say is not going to happen. But what gave rise to it is Instagram is going to start a Twitter clone. So I want to talk about that. Prigozhin, head of the Wagner Group, has gone what some people are calling completely berserk. He said wilder shit than ever this week. Talk about the ill-fated Titanic thing.
Right, there's the sub.
Mm.
I don't know.
I have a little something.
I thought good. Okay. I don't think we have anything new about affirmative action. It's just going to be abolished any day now.
Okay.
There's an interesting Janan Ganesh column. He claims that populism in the West is now completely continentalist. It's just become truly a tribal war where you root for Trump the way you root for a soccer team.
Now, is he
and
the
he can do no
rehabilitated
wrong.
Canadian Me Too guy?
No.
Huh.
He's the finest columnist in the world because he can do the politics and do the literature.
Mm-hmm.
He's very good. He's a great writer. He seems to. I've disagreed with him a lot lately. There's why I hate EVs. Why I'm coming to hate EVs.
Okay.
We're all going to be driving EVs in 6 years, and I'm not too happy about it. There's
I'll fill in the
Kinsey's wife
airtime. I
becoming.
want to talk about UFOs. I have something new to say about. Well, not
Okay.
that. Is it new?
Mike
It's new to you.
Kinsey's. It
Yeah.
will be new to me. Mike Kinsey's wife became publisher of the Washington Post.
She did. She did. Now she swears it's not permanent or CEO technically, right? With CEO or publisher? That's Patty Stone Cipher.
And of course, she has a huge career to herself. That articles didn't even mention she was Mike Kinsey's wife, but she is Mike.
That's
Kinsey's
how
wife.
huge her career is.
Exactly. And she's already being attacked. There was a good article by Matthew Cottonetti about calling for a revival of supply side economics, but thank God it does not involve more tax cuts. I'll tell you what it does involve.
You know, he's Bill Kristol's son-in-law.
Right. Well, maybe they'll run him.
Mm.
Biden industrial policy, this is the segue to the EV hatred, has kicked in big time. Ford just got $9.2 billion with a B to start 3 battery plants. So that they're not fooling around anymore when they're giving $9.2 billion to major corporate interests.
But apparently
bizarrely,
manufacturing costs for some things are so much higher in America that you have to give them a massive subsidy for it to make sense for them to manufacture it here rather than somewhere else, especially chips.
although less massive than before when there were supply chain problems and people realized, hey, there's advantages to manufacturing here. And it was also just announced that Hunter Biden is going to be on the Ford board of directors. Just joking. But there's no possibility for corruption here, none at all. I watched the second episode of Silo. I don't know. My
We can talk
progress
about
is going
that.
like I'm going a Ukraine counteroffensive sort of, inch by inch progress through Silo. But I like
If you
I like the
think
second
it's
episode.
hard so far, well, actually, I'll tell you which part of episode 3 to fast forward through. Anyway, we can talk about the fate of the lovely Rashida Jones. What? Yeah, I haven't been watching much of anything.
I claim Biden has a reverse Epstein problem. I'll explain to you what that means.
That's so. Oh, I know what I'll do. I know what I'll do. Reverse Epstein. I've been invited to be on a controversial podcast. I've tentatively said yes, but I certainly won't go without clearing it with you, and I'm going to clear it with you in the Parrot.
Clear it with Mickey.
Yeah,
that's our policy here.
Some people would say seriously. Some people would say don't go on this podcast.
Really?
Yep. Some would.
God, I can't think of what it is.
It's not.
Oh, it's Are You?
What's Are You?
Or whatever the Russian channel is. RT, RE. The Russian television channel.
No, but you're not completely removed from the realm we're talking about. That's all we're going to say. Suspense. We're preserving suspense. It's not RT. RT, I would probably not go on. Actually, that's such a public relations burden.
Well, it sounds like we have a lot of little things. But you never know what might happen.
Yeah. So without further ado,
there's also there's the name of a rock group that seems to be wildly important that I've never heard of, and I want to see if you've ever heard of them.
Okay. That sounds interesting. Okay. So that will all be at patreon.com/parrotroom, or the part we remember to talk about at least. Also, you should read the Nonzero newsletter. Oh, and smash the like button. We should have said it at the beginning. It works when you say it at the beginning. Smash the like button, rate and review. Exactly. Okay.